Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Coast to coast, pole to pole, all around the world on the internet, thanks to the marvel of technology. I am coming at you live from my little video guest house in Memphis, Tennessee. This is Keith Anthony Blanchard, and you are listening to Center of Light Radio, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement. Power up and spread the light, y'all. It's almost Monday night. Let's see. We got lots of cool stuff. If you're not receiving that newsletter that I've been putting out for the last couple of months, make sure you go to centeroflightradio.com. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a subscription. Make sure you fill that out. I will not send you junk. I will send you some really cool stuff that gives me a charge. So you can bet in return you're going to feel what I'm feeling as I do the research to send you all this really, really cool stuff. Let's see, this newsletter. I got a bunch of notes tonight. I got stuff all over my screen, so bear with me. Also, while you are at Center of Light Radio, make sure you check out the Do What You Love Forever course. It's a tab. I'm running a special still, and I've been saying I was going to hike that price up, but it's doing well, so I'm going to leave it right where it's at. $5. Let me tell you what you get. You get it immediately because it's electronic download. You get my bestseller, The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth. You get the Self-Reflection Workbook, Divine Daily Supplements, 365 Days of Spiritual Nourishment. You get the Do What You Love Forever movie about my life, empowering you with the tools that you need to beat your feet towards your bliss. Check this out. I love saying this every time. You get the Divine Principle audiobook, multimedia, music album. You also get the Anchoring Heaven on Earth audio meditation done by yours truly. Lots of really cool music. Lots of stereo imaging happening in the ear. So I do suggest you put on some headphones and enjoy that ride, that's for sure. To call into the show tonight, dial 888-919-2355. 888-919-2355. Remember, if you are not at home by your computer and you want to hear your favorite show, hopefully that's Center of Light Radio. You need to find radio shows that you hear on Inception Radio Network. Go to the App Store on your phone and download the Inception Radio Network app for free. Everything is right there at your fingertips. Chat room, listen live link, news, podcasts, much, much more. There are many ways to connect to Center of Light Radio for sure. All right, to all my audio listeners, listen up, check this out. If you want to hear this show while watching the live stream video, go to irntube.com. That's irntube.com. If you want to chat with us while you're watching that video feed, look to the bottom right. You'll see a thought balloon with IRN. That'll put you into the chat room. Remember, if you go from the audio, the normal chat room, and then you want to zip over to the video experience, make sure you figured out you have to mute one of those audio input speaker icon thingies. Let's get down to Center of Light Radio business. Tonight on Center of Light Radio, my guest is Brandon Russ. We will be discussing empowerment. Brandon and I will also be discussing under the umbrella of empowerment. We're talking about raising vibration in three main ways: personal empowerment with Adult Empaths, intuitive coaching for life purpose and path, corporate empowerment with companies and transition, executive and organizational management. And then this is a really cool subject for me, the third bit here. Indigo Children education. I have an Indigo boy, so this is something I really need to listen to. Indigo parenting classes and family education delivery. 15 years corporate executive experience in recruiting and human resources. Certified intuitive counselor, certified recovery coach, certified spiritual counselor, Reiki Master, teacher, educator. Woo! Certified spiritual counselor, yes, speaker and trainer, intuitive development series that brings beginning students to a full understanding of the aspects of intuition. Intuitive living series allows development intuitives to incorporate their gifts into daily life. Intuitive leader workshops, how to lead with intuition and produce in any environment. So welcome to the show. I want to say hi to all my listeners and my dedicated loyal fans in the chat room. We have Bot, we have Joe, we have Daria, we have Bean, Starlight. Hello, Starlight. Everybody who's here repeatedly, I do really appreciate you. Lots going on in the world, as we look out and about. Don't be fooled by the illusion. What illusion, you may ask, Keith? The illusion of all the what seems to be negative and powerful things that are happening. I had a guest here on Center of Light Radio a month or so ago, Patricia Cota Robles, and she assured me that we have tipped over the 51% and we are good to go as far as the world moving now well on its way to a place of absolute light and the sureness of anchoring heaven on earth being a fact. So, but we still have to do our part. It's not time to be lazy. It's time to get in there even more. Basically, you can say we're actually now living the part of us remembering how it was done. How cool is that? I think we have Brandon Russ on the line. Brandon, welcome to Center of Light Radio.
Keith, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. And what a great segue to get me up and going, huh?
Well, we incorporating a bunch of new things, this new video feed and last minute crunches. I'm not really good with, but I think we have everything up and running as we need. So welcome to the show again, my friend. Glad you were here. It's been a long time coming.
Absolutely. And you know what? If this is the worst thing that happens today, so be it, right? we're together, and that's what matters. But thanks for having me. I mean, I think it's a timely conversation about action, and it's a timely conversation about empowerment right now. And it's, your format is fantastic for that, because you really get the word out that it's, you just can't expect divine, and you can't expect, things to happen. You've got to be in action. And that's really what my conversation is always about.
You came very highly recommended, through Hillary Rainbow to get you on the show.
Sure.
Yeah,
well, I appreciate that a lot.
She's always
she's
a powerhouse of a teacher.
She's a dynamo.
Yeah, she is no joke. So, Brandon, how did this all begin for you? I mean, did you know this as a kid, this was going to be your path, or like many of us, did pain back you into a corner and you had to surrender?
Sure.
What was your catalyst for moving into this field of all the wonderful attributes and things that you do?
Yeah, I think it's I think that there's a happy and healthy actually thing of multiple things that happen when you emerge and when you become aware and when you begin to do this for a living. It's a big deal, really. For me, I certainly knew it when I was younger. I tell stories all the time about how, when I was like 13 or so, family vacation out at the Cape, meet a whole bunch of kids that never met before. And I went around and I named each one of them by their middle name. And my sister kind of turned to me and said, this is why nobody talks to us. Like, what are you doing? You're kind of being the
you little freak.
Yeah, right. But, with anything, I mean, you do bring up the discomfort of the lesson, and the discomfort of the lesson comes up from time to time with anyone. Sometimes they lose a loved one. Sometimes they just make, mistakes. I'm also a credentialed recovery coach as well. So a lot of times, sometimes a lesson is in a bottle, whether it's prescription or whether it's over the counter or whatever. But sometimes those lessons are kind of whatever they're masking or whatever they're learning or whatever that loss is. What bubbles up for them is the opportunity of saying, you know what, I've got to do this differently. And, and in terms of empowerment, what it kind of started and created is this thing called Spirit Tree Connections. And it is what I always looked for when I was developing. I mean, I took, mediumship classes and carried the moniker of psychic for a while, and that it just didn't fit me because I didn't want to take away people's free will. I wanted them to decide what their life was going to be like, and to pull together a group of people, a group of healers, whether it's Reiki practitioners or healing touch or yoga or, whatever modality it is that they work with, let them shine for what they interpret their light should shine like, and just give people options along in their path. And I will tell you, Keith, I've been pleasantly surprised how much of this I still put on the corporate hat every once in a while. And I go into companies and I teach them meditation. I teach them intuitive leadership. I help them with their decision making so they do make better choices all the way around.
Phenomenal. And I really applaud your position on having people decide for themselves what their life should be, because I've always found it's a very, very dangerous game to play a spiritual fair psychic, vending booth psychic. And then and when I go to these these fairs, I see all these people with their cards and stuff, and that's all cool. I get it. It's part of a novelty. It's part of a quote fair, and that's all fun and good. But it's a very, very gray area, because you can say you need to be careful. In a few weeks I see you being in an accident, so be careful. And the psychic thinks they're helping, and in 3 weeks from now the person is driving their car on the freeway and they remember what you said. Now they're driving nervously and their peripheral awareness shuts down because they're afraid about what you said, and it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's really not a good thing. But also, if you receive positive information by what you say, it could become a very limited thing, because they don't expand themselves outside of what you offer to them. And so I really like helping and guiding. I see this window opening up for you in your future. And what I would suggest you do to bring this about in a more fuller way is blah, blah, blah. So again, thank you for understanding that very, very important position and using it responsibly.
Yeah, I say this all the time. I can tell you you're going to win the lottery tomorrow, but if you never buy a ticket, that's not on me. And, that's a really big thing with this. You see so many people, and this goes back full circle, and what I've learned, this was my pain, was that I watched people give themselves away. I watch them say, tell me what to do. And I'm like, wow, that's not my responsibility with that. But to be able to say, hey, listen, you have this core kind of root thing you need to do, or you've got to kind of work through this. And bereavement, I mean, one of the people that we have within Spiritual, he's a bereavement expert. I mean, sometimes you got to get over the loss before you start to live again. I'm not saying that it's the right way to be stuck, but that's what you see. You see someone stuck in that moment, and maybe they do need a counseled professional to get them over that hump. And that's all part of the lexicon for me.
Absolutely. So Brandon, I'm sitting here looking at your bio, what we're going to be talking about tonight. I did do some viewing over this, but you have 3 different components. You have personal empowerment with Adult Empaths, intuitive coaching for life, purpose, and path.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. This is it's the direct intersection of, doing intuitive work and helping people find their passion. It's, in a nutshell, sometimes people go, oh, so you're a life coach, but the dynamic is so much deeper than that, because one of the things that I've been blessed with, I spent 15 years in corporate recruiting, and I was a corner office guy. I was really successful, 6 figures, and I walked away from it. And one of the reasons why I did is because, the recruiting industry doesn't empower anyone. And I just couldn't live that life anymore. But what it did give me is that I really began to understand structures of like what people needed in their life. So what I would do then to be able to kind of deliver this, that, hey, listen, right now, what you need is a reading. What you need is, a conversation. Let's do some intuitive consulting. But then what might have to happen for you is you may need to go to some of these other, practitioners, or you may need to really kind of do some one-on-one work for yourself. Maybe it's just incorporating meditation. Maybe it's not necessarily buying into a program. That's the other thing with this too. I found that the community, as I started to build into this, I was trying to figure out why so many people that called themselves healers saw other people as threats. And that bothered me in a big way. And what really kind of came out of it for me was that then I realized that that this psychic mediumship stuff was just as competitive as the corporate environment I had left. So I had to kind of develop tools to allow people to kind of do things on their own, kind of, at their own desire, that they would be able to kind of come in and say, hey, I'm going to take a class for development. And I do this series called Intuitive Living, which it's really a nuts and bolts thing. What you find in this world, and this, it interests you, and you say, gosh, I have intuition. And you take a class, and then all of a sudden you're still hungry. So then you take another class, and then you take another class in series, et cetera, and you're just stuck in the cycle. And I developed a class and a course load work that allowed people to take all of that stuff that they knew. Maybe they, know about chakras and auras and past lives, and they pull all those things together, but then they internalize it and they create their own standard. They say, this is the reason why I understand all this stuff. This is why I was curious about it. They have their internal dialogue for themselves. And now they take it and they work it against a primer that they create. I say this all the time, that my 3 are empowerment, kindness, and integrity. Everything I'm going to do, it's going to speak to those 3 things. So for you to ask me to be on your show and talk about empowerment, that's fantastic. It's one of my 3, and it's what the standard of delivery that I always want to have. And we do this whether we're healers, whether we're light workers, whether we're even radio show hosts. You kind of go about this thing, and you're like, I got to get this person, and I got to get this client. And I realized early on, the clients that I was attracting more, they didn't want to be helped. They want to be told what to do. Then I made the conscious decision to make this change. And then I got to tell you, the client base is incredible. They're healers too. They're looking for someone to pull them together. And sometimes people will take our classes and then they'll become practitioners. And it makes a lot of sense. That's why it's an incubator.
I have a very close friend of mine who's a very powerful empath. And I want to ask you the question for any of the empaths out there who might have too much empathy. When I say what I mean by too much is, where's the dial? What do you suggest they do to pull some of that back so they're not like constantly crossfading into other people's energy and being emotional? Or, what do you suggest how they can recognize what belongs to them and what belongs to someone else, and how to buffer that some to where it doesn't affect their life? That's a very important question. I am thinking that for most people who don't have the control over this gift.
Yeah, this is traditionally actually the number one reason why people say, this is why I have to figure this out. They think it's a curse. They don't recognize it, that it's actually meant to be in their blessing, in their toolkit. And with that, if you speak to most, here's the quick answer: protection. Well, there's a place for protection. I would never say to someone, I don't care if it's a sign of the cross or it's white light or it's sage or it's crystals. All of them are valid to me.
It's intention.
However, it's intention.
It doesn't matter if it's a coloring book.
But I'm going to go to the next level with this, and I'm going to say it's actually a boundary. Because if you create a boundary, when you protect, you create a boundary of keeping everything out. But you and I both know that in living, you have to let yourself be open a little bit. You have to allow yourself to be able to accept some of the things that are going to come your way, because you may miss a giant, important, maybe even a subtle lesson, something to help you grow. So if you create the boundary to say, hey, listen, for instance, in the class, let's just take it to there. We may talk about, that brother-in-law that you have to put up with at Thanksgiving. How are you going to draw boundaries with them? How are you going to allow them to kind of accept you for who you are, instead of being the crazy one in the chair going, oh, I see angels, and oh, I get this connection. Some of this is grappling with who you are to begin with. But then the biggest challenge isn't yourself. It is how other people treat you. And, there's several enemies of the empath. One of them is, it's the way it always is. You work in a factory, and they're like, you know what, you feel like you're slowly dying inside. And your first reaction is, well, it's the way it is. This is how my dad did it. This is how I'm going to do it. All of those things that work so counterintuitively with you, that then you're put into a position where you're not living anymore. You're not growing. You're just protecting. You're protecting all the time. And one of the other enemies of the empath is fear. I mean, how many times are you, I work with a lot of Indigo children as well, and their number one thing is, I'm afraid. They don't go to the school. They don't go to malls. They don't, they don't do quote unquote normal social things. Then they end up at the doctors, and then they immediately go, well, they're antisocial and we have this anxiety pill and all of this stuff. I mean, I will tell you that most addicts and overdose, medicated youth are, quite frankly, empaths that haven't been taught the tools.
My boy is almost 11 years old. His level of intelligence wows me, and I'm sure every parent would say that about their own child. But more so today, the wave of children that are coming in. How can we, the listening audience, begin to peg Indigo child behavior? Would get into all of it, but what are maybe 3 or 4, whatever, signs that really scream out to the parent that you have a special child?
Well, first of all, I always identify Indigo children through spirit. So for me, I'm literally told, hey, listen, Brandon, this kid's special. This is what's going on. But I will tell you, I also teach a lot of Indigo parenting classes, because there's a different set of skills to do this parenting. I am a certified parent coach as well, and it's a little bit different in terms of how you kind of manage that behavior. A couple of things. They are incredibly intelligent, but that doesn't mean they use it, by the way. It means that they use it for their own purposes. So just because your kid is a C student, you go, oh, he's not gifted. I will tell you, that just means he's not living in his purpose. That's all. But he's the type of kid that won't study and then pull a C or an A or whatever. And they will literally pull one out of the hat, and you'll be like, and you'll hear this all the time. The teacher will say, if they only applied themselves. Here's the deal, teacher. If you gave them something worth learning for what they need in their journey, they'd be all about it. Because, this child might be prone to wanting to hug people. Not for the, overbearing affection, but because they're like, oh, they need a hug, I need to go give them one. And it becomes socially awkward. It's things that, teachers don't know what to do with that. And the reality is they're on a life path, just like now as Indigo adults, we're like, oh my God, I'm on a life path and this is what I'm supposed to do. The script was written for me. I should still be in a corner office somewhere being, some sort of industrial giant and adding into that complex. But I made the conscious decision to say, no, that's not it anymore. And I really paid attention to that child that was 12 years old that I identified middle names on the cape. So when you have Indigo children, they will challenge you, but in a different way. You still have to give them tools in this life. You still have to say, don't act like that. You still have to give them curfew. You still have to give them the parameters in which they're going to have the fertile ground for them to learn the lessons in this life. And, I say this all the time to Indigo parents, your responsibility is the root, so that then they can develop their sacral. They've got the top levels all squared away. Their third eye and their crown off the charts, but the root and the sacral, that's the parent's responsibility.
Sure. And I want to support you in a point you made. I wish, hope, pray, open to the idea, visualize, and see that the educational system is going to change. Instead of that children should learn the way they teach, that they're going to begin teaching the way that children learn. Very, very important. And I even recently seen an article that said, don't know which particular state, but it said that one particular state is now increasing how many times children go to recess, and their grades are moving up because of it.
Montessori schools in New York State they actually have an outdoor time. They have an hour worth of lunch where you can't be in the lunchroom for more than like 15 minutes after you get your lunch. They want you outside. They want you to go into the woods. They have fenced off, property where you're not wandering off and taking off and whatever. But it allows them to kind of explore. And I think it's funny, one of the other things that we've developed, and we just started talking to a couple of school districts here in upstate New York, we're going to come in and actually teach teachers to give a 3 to 5 minute meditation before class. And it has been incredibly well received. We do this for a living. So of course we want to be able to kind of work this into the school districts, but we're seeing it where this is something like we're so passionate about it. We're like, when are you available? We'll just show up, and provide all of these tools for you because it's that important. And it's, we were actually inspired. There was a local teacher that ended up on the news and said, I provide meditation. Well, I have a meditation CD out. It's called Meditation 101. And it's just a bare basic. It's my own experimentation, learning what it is. I did all the music on it, all that cool stuff. And, so I've always kind of had that in my background, and I do meditations regularly. At Spirit Tree, we actually have, Wednesday meditation, then we'll do evening meditation. So it's a regular scheduled thing for us. And for us to do that, both not only into companies, but then also schools, it's a no-brainer, and it's already been well received. Now we're looking to make sure we have the resources around to be able to deliver it. So it's good.
888-919-2355. 888-919-2355 is the number you call to speak to myself or my awesome guest tonight, Mr. Brandon Russ, who does lots of many things. And you can find Brandon, more of his work at www.spirittreeconnections.com. Brandon, tell me about corporate empowerment with companies in transition. Is this pretty much what you were speaking about, how guiding these corporations to begin to process, begin to think in a higher way, leaving lots of room for things to happen versus the old paradigm of this is how it's done?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do you encourage, I'm sure you do you encourage them to be open to the ideas of the employers, which I think is big? Like, for example, when I invite people to come on Center of Light Radio, or if I'm working on a book that I'm writing or a movie or an album, and I'm contacting someone for their service, they'll say, what do you want? And I'll say, this is kind of what I want, but your input is very valuable to me because the reason I'm hiring you is because you're really good at what you do. So why would I want to stifle your creativity and what you may offer to the table, which you wouldn't if I told you exactly what I wanted. And when I ask this of the person I'm hiring, they bring something I never would have thought about, and it wows me every time without fail.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. First of all, kudos to you to have a creative backing. I think that's actually why you and I kind of gravitated to each other. And when I'm in Memphis, I am sitting in with you. I'm just going to say that. But on the other,
that's a fact.
There you go. And I think, there was a lot to that, and I'll break it down very simply. One of the other really true concepts that I really wanted to have, you've got to create ownership in everything that you do. And we call ourselves co-creators all the time. What you're tapping into is a co-creator thing. We all have different roles. I mean, I have a leadership role. I need to kind of have that, that directional vision. I need all those things, but that doesn't mean that the other person that's, delivering the meditation doesn't have that too, but that's their role for the moment. Now, take that into a company, take that into a corporation. The best run companies are the ones that you don't always know who is the quote unquote secretary and who's the CEO. Now, there's signals and there's signs, right? But if everybody's swimming in the same direction, they begin to understand that, we're part of something bigger. And successful companies tend to be able to really kind of flatten their organizational chart in a smart way, and that they don't feel that it's, an ivory tower, that sort of thing. What I find most often when I'm working with an executive, C-level person, maybe it's maybe it's only a $30 million company, but the conversation then becomes
only.
Only. Well, yeah, there you go. But, within that company, they're in a position where they're influencing lives. There's shows on TV where the boss goes undercover and they're like, boy, I had no idea how the people live. The reason why there is a show like that is because their heads are up their butt and they don't recognize that they have an influence in a lot of different directions. And it's not just quality assurance. Once they realize at the end of the show, they're giving away, hey, I'm going to pay for your house and I just bought you a car, and you feel like you're on a game show after a while. You're not actually improving anything. You're just fixing one situation. But when I start to kind of work with them, I look at them and I kind of go, is this the paradigm that you need? What I find most often when I'm working with companies, though, if it's a place that people want to work, the monetary benefit is, you know what, they don't mind that they didn't get a raise. They love their benefits, or they love their time off, or they love the culture. That's the other piece of this too. If you create this performance culture of, lead follower, get out of the way, you're only going to recruit the dogs that are looking to be the head of the pack. And that doesn't mean that you can't have that role. But guess what? I was in the recruiting industry for 15 years. I'm telling you, it's more expensive, because that's what gets your person plucked and your productivity drops. And then you got to start the cycle all over again, instead of creating a culture that people want to be a part of something, that people want to be a part of your ideas, part of your essence, part of your living. Hey, this is a great guy. I got a kudos. I got an attaboy. That's part of it. And when you start to kind of build on that, then you look out for one another. I mean, even the team with Spiritually, like, they all work together, even without me, even though they came going, hey, Brandon, I want to work with you. And then it just kind of grew that way. So I'm actually running the corporate model, even within the business aspects of it and that attribute. But you wouldn't know it by walking in. I mean, we're not corporate. But those things taken to a corporate environment, it brings in the responsibility, help them really kind of identify what they want to be. So then they create their own standard, instead of saying, well, I read this in a book by Lee Iacocca, so I want to do this. It's taking all of that information, processing it, and making a standard and saying, this is who I am. It's a leadership model that allows you to also do things like pay attention to your intuition. I mean, I mentioned Lee Iacocca. Lee Iacocca talked about his intuition in half of his book, and that was in 1984. And for some reason, when you talk about intuition, it's like, oh, what does that mean? Do you do readings? Do you do whatever? I'm just simply acknowledging one of the tools that I've been given, and that's what makes me a leader. That's what I want to help you develop in your company and allow you to become who it is that you're meant to be and become the best version of you. I'm not done yet.
But also, you do this, the same would hold true, and the same would apply, and I'm sure you work with individuals in the same manner. The same principles apply across the board. How to help you become all that you are and develop your intuition. Intuition, it's talked about a lot in the spiritual movement, and most spiritualists will tell you they have intuitive abilities. But if you really look at that word, I invite you to go to the dictionary and look up the definition in tuition. And it's very, very powerful. I've learned for myself, Brandon, that when I trust what I hear, it's not about being right. It's more about being accurate. It's a big tonal vibrational difference. Now, if one allows themselves to be not right or inaccurate, but you continue the process of trusting, it's like running water through a dirt-clogged hose. Eventually, the water will run fresh and clean, but you have to let it process. And the ego format of holding it down, wondering if I'm right, wanting validation from the person I may be doing a reading for, and so forth and so on, it just gets in the way of the intuition that just naturally wants to flow.
Yeah, it's, and you're talking about kind of the predetermined thing. I mean, ego has its place in this. It's not all bad. I mean, sometimes we hear that, ego. I mean, listen, Keith, at one time you said, I'm going to put together the best radio show ever. Thank goodness you did, because if not, you and I wouldn't be talking today. We wouldn't have met. So I honor in your path that you have that piece of ego. Now, you're also somebody that is out of the carving of, say, like a Johnny Carson going, listen, I don't need to be the person that talks all the time. If I have a good guest, then they're going to remember my show. They're going to remember Center of Light Radio. So, that's where you go, there's a place for my ego and there isn't a place for my ego. But I think at the end of the day, what you're also talking about is when you're in process, and by the way, in process is a big thing for me. Wherever you are, you're in process. And when you're in process with that, there's stuff, just to kind of expand on your analogy, I really like it. You do have stuff in that hose. You really do. Like, you have gunk in that hose, but maybe it was your relationship at home. Maybe it was your relationship with, I've never really been great at like intimate relationships. So maybe that's what I have to focus on. Or maybe, it's relationships with at work or whatever. One of the things I recognized, I couldn't work for anyone. I got to the point where someone would come in.
I have to pause you right there. Excuse me, brother.
Sure.
I'm just full of laughter right now. I couldn't work for anyone. I get it. I get that works wonderful for some people. It's not that I have a problem being told what to do. It's not any of that. It's just it's more of the tone that I like the freedom of doing what I want, when I want, who, with, and forever, how long, and it doesn't matter to anyone. That's just my position of where I see my life.
So once again, we bring up ego in a sense, because just like me, it was like, I see how you're doing it, but I think I can do it better. I think I can do it with my own drive. And I love that, though. You'll find that quite often. Sometimes, but listen, here's the reality of this life. We can't all go out and open up a business. There are some people that still have to, turn the lights on at the state job or the county job or whatever, and they do a very important function.
Absolutely.
But they need to kind of have that survival thing, or that coping, not surviving, but coping, to help them kind of understand, hey, listen, this is my lot in life. I can't leave this really good job because it enables me to go do things like, listen to the radio at night, or do this retreat, or go on this hike with this group and do a meditation on the side of a hill. One thing can feed into another, but then your approach can be a little bit different. Maybe you have to work on forgiving, your boss for not really knowing the difference, so you don't absorb the junk that they're giving you. It's that old adage within a company where it always rolls downhill. Well, no, it doesn't need to roll into you. You can politely say, and this is where we get back to the boundaries and what have you, and be able to say, no, not on my watch. I see what you're doing, and I'm sorry that you can't push back on your boss, but I'm not going to take on this kind of anger mode, and what do you really need? And all of a sudden, they look at you differently. They look at you as if like, boy, this person, I can't get to this person, or all the things that I've been effective with fear, or I tell them the way it is, by the way, all enemies of the empath, that those are no longer effective to them. All of a sudden, then you've changed the dynamic of your own workplace.
For sure. And listening audience, the name of this show is Empowerment. And that's something I want to talk a little more about. Brandon, out of all the attributes that you have, as far as your work, your play, your passion, your love, for me, my biggest thing, which gives me the greatest charge, the greatest buzz, would be empowering people. In fact, one of the taglines in Center of Light Radio is empowering people with the tools they need so they can beat their feet towards their best life. I love being in that place, and it is truly something that warms my heart. I feel full of fire. This was given to me some years ago by a mentor who whispered metaphysical things in my ear. And what happened to my life that day, that week, that month, that year, my life began to curve within itself, and my life became an unfolding miracle every day, all day long for the longest time. Still is, but more so when you're a newbie on the path, because you change your paradigm immediately. Then now things start happening, and you start believing, so things happen bigger and faster. And so you start believing more, and so things happen bigger and faster, even more. And you get into this cycle. And I just love empowering people with tools that they can use to better their life. It's my gig. It is the rest of my life. Out of all the attributes of Brandon Russ, where is your heart? Pick one, if you would. What outlet for you?
Well, I mean, are you asking in terms of an action, or are you asking in terms of what my delivery should be? As
a spiritual teacher, healer, as a guest on this radio show, what do you wake up in the morning looking at your calendar? Oh, I can't wait to do that particular thing.
I love teaching. I absolutely love teaching. You create this fertile ground for people to find you. And then when they do, what are you going to do with them? And, many years ago, I started doing intuitive psychic development, whatever you want to call it. And, 5-6 years ago, and it was a really kind of cool thing. And you would do all the classic things. Like I said, you'd talk about past lives, and you talk about, these are your clairs, and, from the basic up to, hey, let's try and work on, psychometry and whatever it is that was coming out of it. But what people didn't realize in the classes at the time, and it took me some time to realize this too, they were working on themselves. They were really getting in touch with who they were to say, oh, I can't do this, or, oh, I'm really good at this, wherever they landed on the spectrum. And we're not all good at everything. That's part of learning. We have the scientific method of saying, is that pot that's boiling hot? Some people, the only way they're going to learn is by grabbing onto it. And
some people, after they burn themselves, which I don't, they will leave their hand on it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And that's okay too. That's their path. That's what they want to do. And, they withdraw the hand from the hot stove.
Yep.
And ironically, it goes right back.
Yeah. And it's amazing, but you brought up a very important word to me, and that's the word cycle. Cycle, whether you talk about it in terms of addiction, and again, I really believe that most empaths that end up turning towards some level of addiction, they didn't want to face the trials and tribulations of getting their arms wrapped around their gifts, their empathy, who they were in this life, so they prolonged it by doing what they did. But they break cycles. You've created a new cycle. You've done what's known as replacement cycling to be able to kind of work within your own gifts and saying, you know what, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make a change. And this is the way it's going to be. You decided at one time to say, I'm going to create the cycle of good, of what I've now defined good. And you've taken your power and you've taken your control. For me, when I'm up there and I'm teaching and I'm seeing somebody kind of go through their life, and there's personal stuff that always boils up, it's amazing to me how much the epiphany has nothing to do with the past lives we were just talking about. Maybe they had a connection and they're like, oh my God, I just realized why it is I love Irish stuff. And, I wasn't born and raised into that. That's kind of a cool thing for them to kind of reconcile with themselves. But this literally just happened to me today. I had lunch with a student that was one of my first students. And in her path, and I identified this at some point in our relationship, that the reason why she was getting good at all of this stuff, she was a healing touch practitioner, that she was meant to bring healing to her family when their matriarch passed. And this just literally happened a few weeks ago when I asked her to lunch and I said, let's just get together and, let's just talk like friends, And as we did, what I realized was that all that work she was doing however many years ago was actually for what she just went through. It was so she had her emotional IQ in check and she knew who she was. She wasn't frazzled by what was going on around her. She just knew that her mother needed something, or maybe her brother, or maybe, somebody else in the family just needed it. And she knew to be the steward of that. So her emotional component was high. The reason why we got together today is I said, you can let it go now. You've got this. You're on to the next step. And she said, it didn't make sense to me until you just said that. The last few weeks were a blur. But now I'm recognizing this started 4 years ago when we met. And I said, exactly. That's what this is. So for me, teaching, helping people kind of create a new cycle for themselves, helping people identify what their path is in all of this and what your role is, boy, that's, give me that every day of the week and twice on Sunday, Keith.
Agreed. Looking at someone's face, for example, you may have shared something with someone, say, a month or so ago, and they said, I promise you I'm going to do some work surrounding this particular aspect of my life. And one day they come back and they see you after some time has passed and they've done some intensive work.
Sure.
And you immediately energetically see that they've changed, waiting to see what comes out of their mouth, and they say, listen, let me tell you. And then now they're very exuberant. They can't speak fast enough to tell you what has transpired. To me, that mirroring effect of what I have caused in someone's life, it gives me a sense of absolute purpose, that my life is congruent with the reason I'm here, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah, and Keith, it's also, I've done some work on my end too, and I've watched quite a few of your videos, and I think that, even as you're making them and as you're putting that out there, you're like, how much of my story do I want to tell? And then before you know it, you got the dozen or so videos worth going, I'm telling my old damn story. And I'm going to say this to you. You and I are kind of cut from the same cloth. If you connect with just one person
There's no better deal for $4 than the Wendy's 4 for $4 meal. Start with our Junior Bacon Cheeseburger. Made with fresh beef and freshly cooked bacon, crisp all-white meat chicken nuggets, natural cut fries, and an ice cold Coke. All for just $4. No one makes $4 sound as good as Wendy's. Get more for $4. The 4 for $4 meal deal. Now at Wendy's. Offer includes small fries and drink at participating Wendy's for a limited time. Prices may vary. Offer not valid in Alaska and Hawaii. Fresh ground beef available in the contiguous U.S. and Canada.
For that effort, throughout the lifetime and the lifespan of however long you're going to keep those up, you've done your work. And it is an amazing thing when you help facilitate transformation, when you help people, when you help empower them. You didn't do the work, Keith. I mean, you didn't go in there and you say, okay, I want this story to inspire you, and your connection with your God and your creator needs to be heard through this. You're going to glean something from this. You didn't cause that person to reconcile it. You didn't cause that person to have the emotional intelligence necessarily to say, aha, that's what he means. But boy, if you didn't put it out there, they would have still been searching. And that to me is a big deal. That to me is the biggest piece of that too. Sometimes I'll do things or I'll say things and I have no idea where it's coming from. Spirit's just kind of going, here you go. And by the way, whether it's Holy Spirit, my spirit guides, I'm not entirely sure. I'm smart enough to say I don't fully subscribe to any definition. I'm just going to be grateful for that I'm part of it. And then we go from there.
I know exactly what you mean, my friend. For the listening audience out there who don't know, Brandon Russ is a drummer. I would love to see some of your art, my friend, if you can send some of that my way. And by all means, if you make your way towards Memphis, Tennessee, give me a heads up that you're coming. And I would love you to sit in. We have a phenomenal sound system, phenomenal light show.
Wonderful.
My drummer would love someone who can actually really play his kit, so he can sit out in the audience. He never gets a chance.
I'm familiar. I'm familiar. Definitely.
Brandon? Do you play music a lot?
I played when I was a kid. Like most of us, you're 13, 14 years old. I mean, for me, I dated a girl with a drum set, and that's my first drum set. I just kind of stuck with it for a long time, and then life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I got away from it for a little while, and then I went back into it headlong. I actually found someone to be a teacher, for me, who was he was a pedigree of Bobby Rondinelli. So, definitely, wow. I know he was great. He grew up on Long Island. He literally lived right around the corner from Liberty DeVito. It was just, he grew up around drums, and I wanted that influence, and I took lessons from him again, and I got my chops back. And then I got hooked up with Kim Buckley, who in upstate New York, she was quite a name in the early 90s. She was opening for every national act. She was playing, virtually every night of the week. And, she kind of said, hey, I got to change. The family came in and all that other stuff. Well, she kind of reignited about 4 or 5 years ago. And we kind of knew each other through some channels, and we sat in, and we've been playing ever since. We play a handful of gigs a year. We get asked to do a lot of private parties. And then on my other side, I do guitar work for the meditations. Sometimes I'll come in and I'll play things against, soundscapes and that sort of thing. So I play on a couple of different levels, but I'm pretty consistent with it. Oh, and then the drumming, it comes in great when you want to do some djembe work.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, with corporate, I'll tell you, you want to be a rock star, walk into a company at noon and say, all right, everybody, we're going to do a meditation, and just lay down some sort of really kind of primal rhythm that they can just kind of lose themselves in. Let me tell you, if you told me 10 years ago this is what I was going to be doing, I'd have told you were nuts. But now I literally get paid to go in and play drums at a company, a corporate environment at noon, to lead them in a meditation. Talk about being blessed.
That's phenomenal, brother. I'm doing about 200 gigs, give or take, a year. Mm-hmm. So I'm busy. I'm doing about 4 gigs, sometimes 5, sometimes in the recent past, a couple of months ago, my professional window opened up in a really big way. It always has been, but the level of work that was coming in, Brandon, I was doing 5, sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day.
I get it. Yeah, I know. I mean, that was, well, you just described Kim's career, and for me, I was always in the garage bands. I was always, would play out and, what have you. For me, I was able to get in good. I got in good with some studio friends of mine, and they gave me experience, and I never forgot it. And they were honest with me. They're like, you do this well, you don't do this well. So I was able to take that, find a teacher that worked, and really kind of worked at it. And it's like anything else. It's funny, Keith, it's all full circle. Even the story I just talked about, it was about empowerment. I found somebody to empower me with what it is that I wanted to play. And I know you're from Louisiana, and another person that really influences me drum-wise is Stanton Moore. He's the drummer of Galactic, Stanton Moore Trio. He's definitely got the New Orleans vibe all the way through and through. I heard that, and I'm like, oh, that's my guy. As much as I'd love to be able to, play double bass all day long, it just it gets tiresome. It's not as rhythmic. I like grooves. I like, kind of be able to guide it within the song and complement the other musicians, not play over them. And Stanton Moore does that. So, and Keith, thank you for asking me a music question. Everybody wants to, and then I was worried somebody was going to call in and say, "Where's my grandmother?" It's like, we can do that, but okay.
I made a post on social media. I was in a nightclub last night, and it just hit me, and I had to write it. So I take my eyes off of the band and get into my phone, and I wrote, when you do what you love, speaking of music at least for this part, when you do what you love and are blissful, time does not exist. That is the path. The point of bringing this up is being a musician, doing what you do, whoever you are, when you do what you love, the clock just doesn't seem to be there. Brandon, being a musician, when you get into that space, I call it the zone. Some of my friends would call it digging in. That is a magical place. To me, you can rehearse 5-6 days a week, which we don't, but no amount of rehearsal, you can't capture that kind of energy, that kind of oversoul that moves through the entire band through a rehearsal. You just can't do it. And that is a very, very deep meditative state.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, for me, when I'm playing, and, we're kind of known, as I'm sure you are, when you become like a local favorite, you get known for saying, oh, yeah, we're playing from 8 to 11. And then you're not even, you're doing your last song at 12:45 because you're like, oh, yeah, hey, somebody requests something. You're like, yeah, we'll keep playing it and we'll grind it out. And that's a good groove tune. I love doing that. And it's funny, even the work with Spiritry, even into the, my quote unquote 9 to 5 job, I don't feel like I'm working. Not once, it's hard work. Just like when you're up there and you're gigging, you're like, oh, this is, I got to switch off from my G to my high A. And, you're like, okay, I'm kind of working it. But at the same time, you put in the work and then you're really able to kind of get the payoff. I say this all the time, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about intuitive development or if you're talking about musicianship. The difference between a breakdown and a breakthrough is your preparation and your perspective. Because, Keith, if you weren't ready to get that phone call for that evening gig, for that last minute gig, it would have been a breakdown because you would have been, man, I just missed an opportunity. But it was a breakthrough because you're like, I'm going to have a great time now. This is an amazing thing. Same thing with, understanding what your path is. The more prepared that you are, the better off that when an opportunity comes that you go, oh my gosh, this is awesome. We've done our work. We've gotten ourselves into a position. I say this to leaders, corporate leaders all the time. We have breakdowns all the time because we're like, we see it as an opportunity and you force feed it. You're like, we're going to take on this big giant client, and they're not prepared because they don't have their internal structure. They don't have the right people. They don't have the right culture. All those things fall away.
They haven't mastered their craft.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking the same thing when you say those words.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's like, Brandon, it's like, I know a lot of guitar players, that can just flat out, seriously play, be it whoever you are, be it not necessarily music. Yeah. You may know your instrument, be it your instrument, a pencil, be it your instrument, a lawnmower. Yeah. But when, it's like, for example, a race car driver. they're all driving as fast as they can. So it's not about the speed. They're trying to put themselves into the zone where the magic happens, where the intuition happens, where you know exactly how to cut the wheel versus just gassing it to the floor like some guitar players or drummers might do. But the point is, when you master your craft of learning how to get out of the way so that the mastering of your craft is able to facilitate the spirit that wants to come through, life happens in a very big way.
In a big way, in a big way. And, you know, it goes back to the intuitive trust thing. If you don't trust yourself, if you don't trust what you're getting, and again, you know, it also goes back to the hot pot. You know, if you're like, I know it's going to be hot, but I have to touch it, you know, and then I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, I knew that was going to happen, but I made it happen anyways. And then you're like, okay, well, what are you going to do next time? Build on that, make it something different. And you work the craft, so then you stay away from all those hot buttons and that third rail, and you do it as a musician all the time, because you're like, I'm going to go for this fill, and you're like, that didn't work. And then, you know, next time you're like, I'm not going to go for it, I'm going to make it a little more simple, and then you just sound smooth, and you're like, all right, now we're rolling. You know, it's that's the feel with this, and that's what living is. That's what intuitive living is. It's getting into the zone. It's getting yourself into a place where you just really kind of know yourself. You know what you're about, and then you allow the living to happen. You allow yourself to get yourself to a place that you can thrive. You're not scared. You're not doing things just to survive. You actually thrive. And I mean, Keith, think back to early in your career when you got up there. You're like, oh yeah, this is a really big gig, and you had 8 songs down to a T. You got up there and you played scared, but you know, we sounded okay, and you know, and then you played it again, and you just got in your zone. And each time, those filters and those things, those blocks, that trust, you started trusting the guy to your left and the guy behind you, and you know, and before you know it, like you guys were like a fine, well-oiled machine. Then one of you got married, and it was like, oh man, the band's broken up, or whatever happens, right? Because we were all in that spot, but that's how you grew. And then the next time you got in, you're like, we got to find that group because I had that experience. And, you know, your preparation and your perspective is going to help you for a breakthrough. And then you get into a kick butt band, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, this came together in a hurry, and we're really smooth. And, you know, you like these guys, I like these guys. Let's find places in between. And I love you're talking about co-creation again. This is the co-creation.
Co-creators, yeah.
So, you know,
Brandon,
so
we are at the top of the hour. Sadly, this show flies by. I'm actually in the process of working with the production of the producers, and also thinking about extending Center of Light Radio Monday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to a 2-hour show, but that's not happening yet. So would you like to leave us with a small final thought for our listening audience, my dear friend?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a podcast coming out that if you sign up at spirittreeconnections.com, you can get our weekly emails. It's actually a meditation podcast. It's about 10 minutes, each one of them. It's free. It's something that you can get involved with. And if meditation is something that you'd like in your toolbox going forward, you know, to help you get into that zone, you know, they're guided meditations. There's something different each week. And it's a great way for me to empower you to where you want to be. What you do with it is up to you. And I'm just happy to be doing this.
Dig that. Mr. Brandon Russ, thank you for being on Center of Light Radio. Please come back, sir. Anytime you feel the prompting to call me, let me know, and I'd love to get you back on. That's for sure.
Keith, I will always take your call, buddy.
Wonderful. Everyone, right. Mr. Good evening to you, sir. Namaste. Mr. Brandon Russ with www.spirittreeconnections.com. Monday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am here in this captain's chair as the Center of Light Radio mothership fires off into inner space. Next week, my guest is Lisa Dottoli, and we're going to be speaking about how to turn your struggles into strength and trials into triumph. March 21st, NFL football player Anthony Trucks. Show's going to be called Trust Your Hustle. That's going to be a lot of fun. Also, we have Amit Swami, who's going to be on Center of Light, I believe, in July 11th. Famous theoretical physicist. If you have the Discovery Channel and the like, you have seen this cat many, many times. He's been on What the Bleep, and he's just all out there. Remember, when you lay down at night, you have nothing to do. You're breathing. Breathe in the love of God. Breathe in like you're ready to release all that does no longer serve you. I'll see you next Monday night. Peace, love, and light. And always remember to ease into bliss. Good evening.